Boom. We are live, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. Today, it is Thursday, January 26, 2023. Boom. Okay, things are still looking good. We're actually going to start with the S&P 500 today. You may have already noticed this, but we've bounced off the top of that trend line that we've been following and closed in the positive for the larger market space. So, where are we here? 6 hour on the S&P 500. And follow multi-month downtrend. And if we look a little bit more at the granular story here, you will recognize this trading range highlighted in the blue that we drew out, I guess, starting kind of in the beginning of July as the market bounced around. Now, what's important here is some of the actions that took place a little earlier on that kind of signified the potential for a bottom. We saw a higher low start to form here just within the December 22nd, right around the solstice. Here, though, this short time frame, what we're going to look at. Now, I've talked about this idea a bunch. It's the scaling nature of the trading range, almost, or the fractal nature of the universe is one way you could look at it as well. But effectively, this little trading range here that took place between the 18th of December started an upward SOS backup phase pattern that broke us above that multi-month downward trend line. And yesterday, big dump in the markets, but instantly recovered that. And we are now closing, if not fully closed, above the top of that, if you were to look at it as another trading range, which the backup and the SOS phase often are. Again, throughout the horizontal range here, we'll pick the primary support as around something like this, right at basically the breakout of the SOS and backup phase pattern. And we're closing above here and trying to get back above the previous all-time high of this breakout. Now, not of the S&P 500. Now, this, I believe, is a larger accumulation pattern that's taking place here. So often the accumulation patterns, this will be like your primary support actually, and your selling climax. And this may have been the spring, which was effectively September for the general markets and around November for crypto. So a little bit earlier in the S&P 500. Now, what I think is going to happen is we're going to do something like this, and we're going to go almost all the way back to the high of the S&P 500. The GDP just came out positive somehow. Now, we could get into some arguments about what that is. I could be having an adverse reaction to YouTube here or something, but there's just mostly things we can't talk about, which I think is a broader macro story. But I don't think we're going to feel the macro story's headwinds hit yet. I think it's going to take a while. It took a while for us to even get where we are today, and that's just general knowledge about these things. But we've known for a long time. So we're going to get what Michael Burry called the bullwhip effect. And I think it's going to be a very strong up and down sequence where we see something over the next coming year or two that does this. And we see multiple up and down cycles as effectively, they can't let everything just go down now, because then everyone will be mad. You need to soft land the criminal behavior so that people are not super upset with everything. Because if you disturb all of the waters, everybody's going to be upset. So they're trying to get away with something here, it appears. And I suspect that this is actually part of that. Now, I don't want to dig into too many conspiracies because that's an easy way to get yourself into trouble. But ultimately, this type of feeling to me right now, because there is no reason for the macro story to be positive, it's actually very bleak. I don't even think we have come to terms with the level of danger we put ourselves through from 2020 to today. From the scientific community, I really don't think it's dawned on the species yet just how dangerous what we've done actually is, potentially. And that's the thing, we don't know. And that should stun everybody to an unimaginable degree. So given all this unknowingness, I try to stay optimistic. And I still think there's a lot of room for upside. I believe if you removed that breaking point, there could be room to say that, hey, if we actually got through this and you got rid of those people who have been in power that are causing a lot of the, let's say, downstream negative side effects, we could see an upcycle for the human species and our ability to produce things. We're on the verge of potentially being able to produce infinite energy almost with the technology that we have, if we get a little bit better at tuning things vibrationally speaking, is what we're like on the verge of some pretty awesome stuff. So there's a lot of room for upside if we figure this out. So I'm being optimistic at the end of the day, even though the story is like, to get here, it's like, whoa, guys, we may have already broke it. We just don't know yet. It's like, we may have broke the human machine. We don't know. And that's a really interesting argument to try to ask the question of. Again, we don't know what's going on specifically, but the data seems to get worse and worse as we go on. So there would be a lot of argument to say, hey, we're just going to basically go down and like nosedive in the markets. We're going to just drop forever. And I was a little worried because back in January 2020, when things first started, I was very worried about the markets early on. Like I was in January, February, I was like, oh guys, we're screwed. Like this doesn't look good. So effectively this kind of peak fear moment and peak money printing moment, they coincide with one another, because if there's peak fear, they need to quell those fears. And by giving a bunch of people more money, less people notice. And how is GDP up? It doesn't make any sense. So something's going on. I'm not sure what it is. It doesn't seem to come from the Fed's monetary printing supply per se. But anyways, the point of this is this bullwhip effect, I think, is highly likely. I think Michael Burry maybe even underestimated the potential of what that will do, because I believe it's going to bring us back to previous all-time highs for the S&P 500 pretty shortly. So that's the thesis I'm making right now based off this. And this is a primary support. And this is a selling climax. And this here as your spring. Effectively, because everyone is, recession, and it's that bad. But look, none of the macro story matters if you just start printing money again. And if CPI all of a sudden drops and GDP is doing well, I don't know. They can just lie about statistics and data, apparently. So why would they not be able to lie in this field as well, right? We can clearly tell that there's corruption going on in these verticals, and so if they're able to lie about data and statistics around medicine and nature, why wouldn't they do it in money to get away further with the things that they're trying to get away with? So that's what I've posited now. I've started to think that if you're dealing, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. This is shame on me. So won't let that happen again. I believe we're dealing with a much different animal than I originally anticipated. So not a great feeling, but again, optimism on the upside for if people actually, for the first time maybe in a whole generation or two, realize it. If not, whatever, just go live by the rivers and the oceans and stare at the stars. It seems like a great plan. So this upside momentum, I think, is going to continue. I think it's going to shock a lot of people. Again, it's very early on in this turn. If this does switch, again, the light behind me is green. If this does switch, if we do see this get stuck around 420 and then come back into the trading range and do something like this, we could go so much lower for so many ideas, because this is just all printed fake monetary value. It doesn't, like, yes, you could make arguments for there's real value in each of the companies and the assets that they own, but for the last, at least let's start just here in 1995. Since 1995, all of this is held together by money that's just being printed by the Federal Reserve and given out to people, and often given out to build things that probably shouldn't be building. So that's a very difficult thing to build society on at scale. And this idea of a great reset or the collapse, I think, is the end result that they're trying to get to. Now, how we get there, what types of steps it takes, and if someone would be successful at trying to reset the entire monetary system. We've seen implications of stuff like this before in the Bretton Woods. Like, do we get this much larger breakdown and return to the previous lows of even 2020? Or do we come back all the way down to the top of the trading range, which we've seen many times in many Okay. The internet or the electricity in the jungle for some reason always manages to find a way to go out. It's like just an undeniable fact of the fate of the electricity in the jungle. At one point, some shit's going to happen. Some tree, some animal, something always manages to always manages to turn the internet off. You know, the jungle is full of surprises. You definitely don't live here for the consistency of the electricity, though. Okay, where were we? Sure, we'll continue. That was only a minute of downtime. Yeah, I do have a backup. It really just keeps the internet on. I guess I could put one here on the microphone. The microphone uses a preamp. That's the downside. Is that the otherwise there'd be audio still, and it wouldn't have made too much of a difference. Okay. Let's continue down this thesis here. Is the audio working? Jeez. Something. Okay, check. What happened? Check 1 2. Why can I? Oh no. Did something happen with the preamp? It seems. Yeah. Okay. Whoops. There we go. I gotta remember to fix the preamp cable there too. Okay, we're back on. No sound. We fixed it. There's two things that happened there. Okay. Tech in the jungle. Aptos just absolutely on a freaking tear. So this is one of the things I was talking about. I was kind of wrong here. I expected Gala Games to move much quicker. I actually expected to move much more similarly to Aptos because of how much early momentum it had. So let's go over Aptos here. You know, aside from all the, I don't think that there's much room for downside right now. I think they're going to print to quell feelings. That was the thesis I was trying to get at there. So screw those guys. Let's go over to the crypto world, which is the fun spot for now. Again, I do not believe we are in a new bull market, but I definitely believe that we are going to get a continuation in the current bull cycle that we're in. Let's take a look at Aptos for now. So one of the fun things I was looking at earlier, I thought was actually nice to share and take a look at, was the volume profile. Haven't turned this on in a while, but I want to show you something similar here because I was noticing this. I thought it was something potentially very valuable to keep an eye on. The point of control here is the red line that runs through. As soon as Aptos was able to get above the point of control, we moved up very quickly. And continued outside of the trading range that formed around that particular point of control. So here you can see this beautiful trading range, reaccumulation range that started on the 13th of January. Could barely get down to the bottom, and as soon as it broke out, and again, this is where the point of control is. So what we want to do now is take a look at a few other ideas here. Oh, why did these all turn into Gala Games? We'll fix that. So we'll use Gala Games now, though, anyways, because here it is. And we are right now right at the point of control. So Gala Games is right at the point. And this was something I should have taken into account. Number one, once it gets past the point of control, it's going to move quickly. So it's in a great position. Let's take a look at Magic, which was a really nice breakout as well. Now I've got a few areas of the trading range drawn up here. Obviously the two top big green lines and the back of this trading range that you'll notice here, which we followed a bit more closely in the private group. Ultimately, it appears to be like a double bottom of sorts. And as soon as we broke out past the control, again, this kind of red middle line, we went up and very quickly and continued outside of the box. Ape token as well, through the trading range here we've been following, and very specifically yet again at the point of control, as soon as we bounced back down and we started to move up. I suspect that we're going to continue to move up all the way to the top of the trading range here with Ape, and just as Magic had done, it will continue to move outside of the box. So I don't think that Ape is going to stop at 8. I think we're actually going to get a continuation in much of these markets. Again, to remember that the gaming sector is huge, and it's a little bit shock resistant compared to some of the other aspects of the economy. People keep playing games. There's these videos I share on Twitter of kids playing games like in floods and stuff. Like people are going to play games apparently. So this break of the point of control, I think, is actually a very valuable point to pay attention to. It may take time to build up its breakout through the point of control, but once it's on the other side of this for now, it's going to continue up to the top of the box and probably out further, upwards of maybe $10 here for Ape. So back to Bitcoin. Bitcoin right now, let's get rid of the bear claw and just focus on the VPVR. Okay, so let's go back here to the weekly with Bitcoin for now. And what's interesting is, look at this. Same thing, point of control was even with a lot of data here too, although I'm sure if I had the extra $300 data, the majority of the data is down here at $300 for Bitcoin. But nonetheless, here we are right now, the point of control, and you can probably get an even clearer vision. Just so between 2017 and today, the point of control was basically $17,000. So as soon as we broke out of that point of control, there was a lot of easy room for upside. So this type of here, right through 17,000 basically. This bottom, not the red line, but the smaller red one here, through the bottom of the point of control here. So this was basically beautiful. So the fact that we're seeing this on multiple assets now, so let's take a look at Avalanche. Avalanche is right now stuck at the point of control and testing it. So this to me is the space right before they break out. Avalanche is there, Gala is there, and just like we saw with Magic and Aptos, once they're outside of that range, and Ape, they continue very quickly. So I suspect continuation patterns in these. Again, finding something like Aptos early when it's moving quickly is difficult, but those generally move faster further than the other ones as well. So I thought Gala Games a little further ahead, but I guess had I used the point of control method here that I'm kind of re-finding out, I guess. I used to use the point of control on the screen all the time. It was one of my favorites. But ultimately we hadn't seen the huge upward cycles we were waiting for. So it's not as useful in the distributional pattern because it's more difficult to tell what type of volume you have there. It's easy to use the supply and volume signature on the bottom of the screen. Anyways, point of this being, I suspect that everything that's right below the point of control right now is just on the verge of breakout. The S&P 500 is strong. The dollar is looking a little weak. Now, that's not to say it's going to continue that way. Again, I don't know how much higher these breakouts could go, but I think the first two extensions seem pretty likely now based off the fact that we've seen them in so many other assets. So Matic actually has just finished part of this beautiful setup. So let's take a look. Oh, let's cancel here. So this is actually a pattern we've seen frequently as well. It's a reaccumulation after decline. And right now, let's go to the daily so we have a bit more data. Right now, look where the point of control is. Well, first off, it's all the way back down at the bottom. Let's get rid of that bottom part for now. Let's just focus on the trading range then. Okay, so again, sometimes you get more clearer signals back there where we had more data and the point of control was still where we were sitting, like Gala Games. That's a very easy to eye up spot. Here with Matic, it's a little less powerful per se, and a lot of these times these reaccumulation after declines where you have this are not as powerful per se either. Now this has been a very interesting one because you had a huge selling climax, and now what appears to be a trading range forming here that we just broke out of. So if we go to the 4, actually probably even clearer on the 1 hour. Here on the 1 hour, you can see a really nice horizontal reaccumulation range, basically looks textbook. And right on the point of control for the 4 hour, not the longer daily time frames, which would have been nice, but nonetheless here as well. So broke outside of the point of control, held inside the trading range, and we're moving probably to the top of the box here for another 20% on Matic pretty quickly. Now, again, does it go further and farther? Some of the other market signals are saying that, but kind of one step at a time is the best way to go. Now, back to Bitcoin. Could we expect a retracement of some kind? A test is always nice, but it depends where you look at this market cycle. So currently, this little area here that I've marked off, this is what I consider to be the spring of this. So in 2000 and the sell-in climax. I assume that this will in the future look like the sell-in climax. We're going to find something like a really big automatic rally, and then we're going to come back down and we'll form another trading range effectively with a little bit less volatility than we had last time. And then that will tell us how we're going. So if we've used this example previously, but here when you go to Bitcoin, and this is our chart from the previous beginning of the bull market cycle. I haven't touched it or edited it, and that's why I keep it this way. Here you can see that the selling climax was actually a very small trading range that took place after large scale distribution. So again, we try to think of this as idealized market cycle. If there was accumulation throughout 2017 to 2019, from 2013 to 2017, and then this big cycle upward like this, boom. And then you had distribution, boom, distribution into the selling climax. And then what you saw was an automatic rally with your secondary test, your spring, your test, your LPS, and then a huge breakout, really beautiful trading range. And the potentiality of an even much larger, what could be viewed as an accumulation range after an accumulation range, right? So turtles all the way down here with these types of patterns. So the idea that right now where we're sitting today here is an accumulation range very similar to here, I think is the most likely outcome of this event at this moment, which is that we're going to see an automatic rally that could take us as high as $44,000 and come back down and form a trading range where we eventually have a spring at around $17,000 again before we continue onwards and upwards. Maybe have a backup cycle right here and then maybe hunt upwards past of a few $100,000 into the millions of dollars over the next decade. So that's kind of how I'm charting this idea right now. This did get a little bit deeper than I thought. Again, for Bitcoin, if you go back and look at my videos where I was wrong here, I thought this 3 peaks and domed house idea would stop us out at around 33,000. I thought we were going to see a horizontal accumulation range with a much thinner spring effectively. I, on the other hand, did not happen to recognize how much leverage and degenerates there were in this ecosystem. Although I could have guessed probably if I had paid a bit more attention. I was a bit more focused on something else at that moment. So ultimately, I think everything is looking very positive within the this particular trading momentum at the moment. What the F is up with Aptos? Isn't that the FTX jewel? Look, Aptos had great tech. They were able to bring in a lot of early funders because of it. It wasn't just FTX or a bunch of other people that invested in that idea. But again, they launched it, went to $11, went back all the way down to $3. Now it's back up at $18. So there's very good market operator hands there. So it's definitely something we're going to keep an eye on as it calms down, just because the market operator there is like clearly got a game plan. So if they were able to mark it up and then control the price and the asset that well still, it's a good sign, technically speaking. My buddy Luke Trade said, just trade the Ponzi, don't ask questions. That's a great, don't invest in it, but maybe trade the Ponzi, sure. I thought it was a hilarious sentiment. So right now too, it's kind to note that the top of the previous trading range is acting as a support, which may actually, again, I said this right at the beginning, is this a giant SOS and giant backup phase to what becomes a larger market cycle? And this is what happened in the past for Bitcoin prior. And this is what happened prior to that, is that you saw an accumulation range. And then if you looked closer, you saw a smaller accumulation range somewhere around the spring or the selling climax, depending on how you want to look at these two ideas. You could call them the selling climax for this trading range was also the spring for this much larger trading range. And that continued to happen since it's basically its inception. So I suspect that something similar is happening now because it's happened every time before. It's not a great way to make an assessment in a thesis, but it's usually pretty damn reliable. Like the sun's going to come up tomorrow. I don't know that for sure, but I can make a pretty good guess. Now, when the sun comes up tomorrow is a little bit more consistent when Bitcoin's price moves up, but ultimately this repeating pattern of growth cycle distribution, accumulation, growth cycle distribution, accumulation has happened every time. And I suspect the volatility will decrease in this next automatic rally. So I don't think we're going up to 60K, probably go up to 40 and then do something again very similar to what we saw prior, which is that we saw an accumulation range that was actually lower than the previous all-time high that took another 6 to 12 months. And again, when we're up at 40 grand, people are going to be calling for 60 to $100,000 Bitcoin. And then that's probably with the time when the market maker will dump it all the way back down, because the market macro story is so bad right now that I can't see any reason to get into new all-time highs quite yet. I was hoping that wasn't going to be the case. I kept my tongue tied about that crap, but at least finally it's now coming out of the mainstream where people are recognizing like, whoa, bro, something really wrong out there for the excess death rates to be so high. How does that even, I can't compute that. That doesn't compute in my brain. So the macro story is not great. So there's no reason to go to new all-time highs quite yet. But I think there's reasons for Bitcoin to go new all-time highs, period, because it's just a better version of money than the government-backed stuff. Hell, even fucking Dogecoin is better than the US dollar in terms of like a reliable currency, because at least Doge ain't printing it, inflating it, and then just giving trillions of dollars of it to their friends for Inflation Reduction Acts. Hey, you need some guns and some bombs? Don't worry, we got you, bro. And you know why they do it is because that doesn't affect core inflation for the average individual. You know, you don't use F-15s or tanks, so if they're spending a bunch of money on it, you would never notice in the price of your eggs or maybe your gas. I don't know. Pretty sure tanks use gas. Can't tell. Maybe tanks run on solar. I think that's what we figured out. We need to make sure all the tanks are running on solar. This is how you end World War. Hey, bros, tanks should be electric, right? Like, if you don't have electric tanks, you're clearly, actually, we should, like any good military gear, it would be nuclear, because that's much smarter. Nuclear gear sounds much smarter. Anyways, we've gone off down a rabbit hole and a tangent. Let's take a look on the the micro photo here for Ape as well. I did want to look at these trading ranges that have taken place again right around the point of control. I think are so important. And then their backup phases. This is where the markup starts to get stronger, and then where we're going to see volatility increases. We start to get up higher, and then the market cycle will be over for a little bit. But yeah, I think about 90 days. That's my guess. Like, quote that, screenshot it. And again here, what do we see again with Ape? Looks like a SOS and a backup phase. Here's your spring, here's your SOS, here's your backup. And I actually charted this out quite nicely. I was going through Gala Games to get the, here we go. Let's look at this on the 45-minute or the 1 hour. Yeah. So here you can actually see some of the volume signature characteristics and lifestyle. Now, we've gone over versions of this before, like the Jesse Livermore chart pattern. Gala's moved slower than I wanted. And one of the reasons why I was so excited is because it had so much early momentum. Much like Aptos, you're looking for, or Magic, you're looking for those that have that speed quickly. And Gala is one of the that's had it, but it's had this longer drawn out a secondary accumulation phase that's taken place. Now, again, I mentioned early on that these can take 14 to 24 days on average, so it's not out of the ballpark yet. And again, if you actually look down below here, let's put it on the 4 hour, maybe it'll be a bit clearer. Yeah, on the 4 hour, it's even a little clearer. So you can see throughout the trading range, the first part of the range here, which is phase characterized as phase A, effectively, like this. Actually, sorry, phase A was probably around here. Yeah. Okay, so you don't normally want to chart out the reaccumulation ranges with phases because they're much shorter, and we already know the intent of the market maker is bullish. So it's a little bit, probably not the best interest to use the phases, but they do operate very similarly here to where we saw what I believe, again, the most likely kind of phase A and phase B, which is the downward supply. We saw a low volume spring of some sort, which was usually an LPS. That's what it appears to be, is the back of the trading range and LPS range. And then we've seen two more diminutions of supply. So we've seen a rise in the supply coming into the market for this first uptrend. Couldn't break outside of the point of control. Again, effectively got thrown back down, but this time with a little less volatility than we had this time. and around a little less volatility than we had this time too. So just slightly smaller forms of volatility each time. Came to the bottom of this, although you could probably give it to the bottom of a trading range throughout the pattern as well. I suspect that we're gonna get one more boost up of green supply, and then here again, just the down, up, down, up, down. Probably get a smaller up, another down, and then that's probably where we'll get the final breakout. This type of thing is meant to make you impatient. Like I've been feeling super impatient. I was like, God, stupid gals. I was hoping that this would be a trade that was going to be over by like already effectively, because sometimes that's how often they happen that quickly. Not always, but as we've again, if we go back to Aptos here, look how short these trading ranges are. Once you identified an accumulation range, it was like, let's see, right out of the 9th, it was 6 days, boom, into another trading range. And this trading range lasted not even 4 days, boom, straight up. So when there's early market momentum, you expect the early market momentum to continue. So not the greatest sign for Gala for me. I love the early momentum that had the start here, boom, boom. And then this last one is just taking a little bit longer than I would have liked. But it's not anything to be too alarmed about. We do see that quite consistently across the board, that you have longer ranges. So even with Magic, the first reaccumulation range here was approximately 45 days. It took 45 days to get that. And then it was this secondary reaccumulation range right at the back of January 18th, effectively right here, 6 days, and then boom, up 70%. And I prefer to this position where you only have to be there for like 4 to 6 days before you're up 70%, because it just makes it easier to be in a so-called trade, effectively. Anyways, trades are shorter time frame, and I also like these for longer holds. We've made venture investments in Magic, Ape, and now we have a position in Gala. Yes, so everything looks great to me. I do suspect that we're just seeing a longer reaccumulation for Gala. There's so much momentum out there. And that's it. Let's see. A few of your guys' thoughts and questions. Where are you seeing the price of Avalanche going up to for the next bull? Okay, well, I don't want to make assertions about the next bull market because there's too much that's not clear in the macro story for me to try to make guesses. Like, it's really weird out there. And I love research, so it's like always disheartening when you love something and then everything that you find is just not good. You're like, I like researching things, and what I'm finding just doesn't look good out there. Haven't been able to talk about it on YouTube for basically 2 years. At least we're getting closer. People are talking about it now on YouTube. And more credible people. Like in early 2020, if I'm to talk about it, like, you're just going to get banned. So I'm glad to see people are finally coming around. Jesus. No, it's Eco Alliance tanks. Yes, eco-friendly tanks. That's what it is. Yeah. Okay. Let's see a few more thoughts. Wasn't there a spike on Binance old years day? Oh, maybe. Epic move. Yeah. 200-week moving average is the same. Okay, so we'll look at Avalanche too, if you guys asked about Avalanche. So we'll go over Avalanche again here. So back to the weekly. We'll start off at a macro story, get as much data as we can, look at that. Right now, basically, Avalanche is right at the point of control. It is lined up for a move, probably about 100% pretty easily, I would suspect, from here. It's in its final stages. So if we get a little bit of a closer view here as well, you start to see the formation of what's basically a rising gradient bottom on the trading range as well. And if you remember back to the beginning of 2020, these were often the most bullish. We just saw this very similar pattern with Bitcoin as well. And this is likely to break to the upside. Now, I try not to actually focus on horizontal ranges, especially if you're beginning. The best way to focus on is always horizontal. It just removes bias from the trade itself as well. I mean, we can see there's a rising floor through the bottom of the range. We don't need to focus on. Let's focus on the bottom of the range. We've actually just tested the point of control. And now we're hitting the top line of resistance. But again, that top line resistance is at 1835. And if we go out to the daily, or sorry, out to the weekly, we can see the top. Yeah, we've got this basically a hold between. Give them more data for fun. Yeah, at around 1780 to 1810, there's a lot of top line resistance from the volume profile here too. So, but I suspect just like everything else, you're gonna have like a little test out here through the next little bit, and it's gonna go boom, basically straight to $23. It'll be another little backup phase here between 24, where there's a lot of point of control, and then up to around $30. And that's what it's gonna be like for the next 30 to 90 days, ladies and gentlemen. So that's awesome. Now, where you asked where the overall growth for, I have no idea, but we could come up as high. Actually, we'll go in a little closer to make sure we get this a bit more perfected here. We'll go from the top of the rally. We'll go from the top of the rally to approximately the bottom of the spring. Now, my first sentiment would be around $44, which is the 1618 extension. So if Bitcoin's around 44,000, we could see Avalanche up at around 44. Now, at that point, I don't know. We could come back down again lower, we could even go as high as 64 and again see a bigger, even 80, and see a bigger trading range at the back end take form. Now, let's make another macro adjustment here and see, is there actually another story taking place? So this is one of the weird ones. This was a lot of, let's see here. Yeah, this was almost like a giant reaccumulation back here, wasn't it? Into SOS and then distribution. And now we're in a long form accumulation. So we could come back all the way up to $60 or $70 here, and start to see maybe another form of a trading range start to take place. Something like this, just to make a bit more sense out of this. I mean, this would be not too dissimilar to what we saw with Bitcoin. Up to $20,000, selling climax, automatic rally, a spring somewhere in the near future when some crazy shit happens we can't foresee. Oh. I love that I'm charting with no charts. I gotta get better. Remember here, I'm gonna put this like button thing more in front of me, so when I switch screens, it's easier for me to see. Okay, that should make it better. Yeah, I go down. I always look at my screen, and it's harder to see. Like I've got the streaming screen open as well as the. It's just a button. There we go. Okay. So with Avalanche here, right at the point of control, I suspect, to the top of the box, and then maybe even as high as $70 here. If we draw from the top of the range, something like this. Could go this high if we see Bitcoin at 40 grand, and then again form a much longer accumulation range. Very similar again to what we saw with Bitcoin, some type of spring down here, but big distribution, selling climax, spring, and then it came up, and then it came down and formed a much larger trading range over the course of a year or two. I think that's what we're going to see in most of these assets. There's great reason to believe that again, that macro story isn't going to play out anytime soon. It could take 2-3 decades for people really to understand, I think, how dramatic from 2020 onwards has been on our choice as a species. I really don't think it's in the human like general consciousness yet of like what happened. I think everyone's still pretty like hidey hum ho of like it's like whoa bro, it's happened. So yeah, bullish because of that. KDM says, I got some small brains back August. Should I hold on to them? Yeah, generally I think it's better to be of the mindset in venture capital. It just works out better. So yeah, look at this beautiful trading range again that Avalanche has formed into. I suspect that this is going to take us pretty high pretty quick. And we're seeing mostly a decline in supply as well. So this is a good sign. And no real big tests yet either. Now, the other thing you could check here is how big is the spread. 10%. 9.85. It did reduce a little. It'll probably try to like come down here and retest this point of control, maybe even on this bottom side once or twice more, just because of how much volatility was here. So we'll see. Yeah. ETH. Okay, let's take a look at ETH. Okay, Ethereum. Oh, here actually we haven't shared this one in a long time either. So this is the original Ethereum chart. As again, you'll note, after the big distribution, the selling climax way down here was the start of a smaller accumulation range. So again, we could make the argument here that some of the breakout of the trading range that we're seeing now for Bitcoin won't go super high. It could be, some of these other assets could be similar to what we saw with Ethereum, which was not a reclaiming of even close to the all-time high within that trading range primarily, and off the back of a multi-month distribution as well. So look where we are now, though. We've broken. Now, what's nice about Ethereum is that we actually came all the way back on the top of the regression line. I thought this is what we would do with Bitcoin, although we did again fall to the top of the previous all-time high, both in Ethereum and Bitcoin. So we're holding on kind of by a thread here. So again, there's a lot of reason to believe that something like Ethereum could come all the way down to $500. Like, there's room for downside still here. The entire market, basically, the S&P 500, everything, there's a lot of room for downside in pretty much everything, because it's all fluffed up by some imaginary thing people call the US dollar. So I think once you understand that assertion, it doesn't mean the hallucination can't go on. People hallucinate all sorts of things in different generations for long periods of time. So it's not, they burned witches at the stake in the United States, like not that long ago. Humans are totally irrational sometimes. Well, they'll do things that just make no sense. So I'm not going. You don't think that it not making sense can't go on for longer than you would suspect. So we try not to bet on whether it makes sense or not. But again, here we broke out of that this downward trend line, and it's a little probably. Let's actually go to a new chart because I want to keep this one. Here we go. Awesome. There we go. So it appears that we are in the middle of the range. There's not as much room for upside. It does look like we're going to get to the top of this though. And again, I suspect that we'll see further extensions just because we have in all the other assets. And usually when the composite operator does it one place, they do it in all other places so that they can take profits of the accumulation that they've been in. And here you're talking about 200 days of accumulation. It's not a ton. What was the Bitcoin previous cycle lows accumulation time? For the selling climax of 2018, it was around 126 days. So not too dissimilar to what we have today. So with Bitcoin, after that 126 days of basically your cycle low accumulation, you were up for around 116 days at around 214% for Bitcoin. That's a pretty high growth rate from that $3,000 it started at. So Ethereum, now it wasn't as fast out there. Like if you look at Bitcoin to Ethereum, Bitcoin grew significantly higher than that same cycle low or the selling climax portion of the accumulation. For Ethereum, it was actually smaller. It was only, it was bigger percentage wise, but smaller in terms of reclaiming its all-time high. So I guess it depends how you want to look at that. Percentage wise, it was actually higher, but it was lower than the all-time high in relationship because Bitcoin went all the way back to $13,000, whereas that was still significantly lower than the previous all-time high for Ethereum. So I'm not sure how you'd measure that particular type of idea out into the future here, other than we're what is this about? Yeah, around 250 days into a horizontal accumulation range. I suspect we'll get 100 days of up, but how much of that up? For us to, so this may be more similar to what happened last time with Bitcoin. If you were to reclaim even up to around $3,420. I don't think it's going to go that high. I think it's going to probably go around 2,500. That would be pretty similar. So if it breaks past that, though, I mean, again, this is just reliant upon money printing and how good people feel from that printing of money. So not too much more, that it doesn't take much more than that. Anyways, great chat with you guys today. Light's still green. Nothing has changed. The sentiment is bullish across the board. So that's a good sign.